I don't know, a safe, comfortable place that you can be around family and friends.
Homes RI is a coalition of organizations working to ensure that everyone has a safe, healthy, and affordable home. Hopefully, these interviews will bring insights to the need and work and highlight where housing intersects with other issues and opportunities.
Uh, my name is Jim Nyberg. I'm the executive director of LeadingAge RI. Yeah, so we are a trade association that represents long-term care providers across the spectrum. So we have nursing home members, assisted living, senior housing, adult day, home health, and the PACE program of Rhode Island. And there's basically three buckets of things that we do as a trade association. The first is advocacy, with the state, with the General Assembly, the state departments. The second is education. We do conferences and seminars for members. And the third is sort of general information and communications for the members to help support them as they run their organizations. We have a national leading age down in DC that does similar things at the national level, but we're our own entity here in Rhode Island. We're just part of a constellation of organizations. There's leading ages in about 35 states.
Great. And so when you talk about, housing for seniors, what would you say is the relevance of housing for the quality of life for these people as they age?
It's a tremendous issue. It's important at any age, obviously, to have safe and affordable housing, but it's certainly a challenge for the older population in Rhode Island and beyond. Whether you live in your own home or need an affordable senior housing development, or even things like assisted living for nursing homes. Housing basically is critical to the health and well-being of older people. And that's something that we advocate for as much as we can, really.
Yeah, and so for these people, when we talk about aging in place and aging in community, what do you think is the difference there in, executing those ideas and the impact that could have on these people?
With aging in community, I guess there's two threads. There's supporting people in their home, whether it's through home modifications, adaptive devices to help them stay in their own home. And obviously a lot of localities have other tax programs to help them afford to stay in their community. But then the other thread is senior housing, which are the providers that are part of Leading Age. And the simple fact is that there's not enough of the affordable senior housing units in Rhode Island and beyond. There's a federal program, the HUD 202 program, that has quickly been the main source of funding for these developments. And about 10 years ago, it was slashed dramatically. And only in recent years has been incrementally increased. So there's been no real new construction of affordable senior housing in recent years, at least funded by the federal government. So the goal now is to try and find other funding sources or to get new federal funding to support more senior housing, because the ones that are out there often have pretty lengthy waiting lists of maybe 2 years to get in.
Yeah, and we talk about housing and other needs. So what would you say are some of the unseen needs of seniors that need more attention in our conversations and debates?
I think the general perception is that they're living in their own home with the mortgage paid off and are doing fine, but that's not the reality. It costs a lot to maintain a home regardless. There's various studies and data that show that older people are housing cost burdened at a pretty high percentage, whether it's owning their own home or renting an apartment. And so I guess the unseen issue is the older population is facing some housing cost burdens.
Yeah, when we talk about that cost burden and affordability, how do you think that that plays with, you know, other challenges that seniors face, such as healthcare costs and everything? So how are those housing costs harming the senior population?
Right. It goes back to what you spend your money on. If your housing cost burden and spending more than, I think the basic threshold is about a third of your income on rent. So if you're spending, say, 50% of your income on housing, that takes away from what you can pay for medications, food, healthcare, and other important things. So it's definitely has a ripple effect.
Yeah, and you mentioned you know, Section 212 and other programs from HUD. So what do you think are you know, what types of government action should be happening right now to help with the quality and affordability of housing for that population?
There's three things, I think. Two are at the state level. One is the upcoming housing bond in March, and hopefully some of that will be allocated to support senior housing. I think last year, 2020, there was a lot of momentum at the beginning of the year around housing issues, including the bond, and then COVID obviously short-circuited things, but trying to regain that momentum because there's the housing bond, and then the governor's budget had included a permanent revenue stream to support housing, which again would obviously help seniors as well as the rest of the population. And hopefully that'll be included in the budget this year. So those are two things that can be done to promote housing. And the third thing that's more focused on the older population is a program called SASH, Supports and Services at Home, that originated in Vermont and has popped up in a few places around the country, including Rhode Island. And basically, in a senior high-rise or a senior housing development, it funds a nurse and a case manager, and the people that live there sort of enroll in the program. But it's really just about case management, a little bit of a wellness programming, and some oversight or supervision by a nurse if somebody has a problem. They have access to these supports right on site. And it's been found, it's been around long enough, there's some research coming out that it does help people stay in the community. It reduces the risk of hospitalizations, and it lowers the growth of healthcare spending. So it does save money. So that concept called housing with services is something that we're looking to promote and expand to other developments in Rhode Island, and other people are trying to do it elsewhere too. So that's a big thing that's helpful.
Yeah, and you know, when we talk about new trends for integrating housing and health services for seniors, are there any models to highlight here in Rhode Island, things that are happening and, you know, moving in new directions, such as, you know, you mentioned the Vermont program. So what's happening here in Rhode Island also?
Yeah, the main one that I know about that, or the main entity that has adopted that model is St. Elizabeth Place in Providence. It's 100 plus apartments, and they have on site a nurse and a social worker, and it's primarily grant funded right now, and they're just looking at ways to sustain it going forward. And it's had similar success as the SASH models in other states in terms of improving the health and outcomes of people. And a lot of it too is about, particularly with the social worker case management, it's about the social determinants of health. So if there's a person there who you know, has, you know, food insecurity or things like that, they can help them with accessing programs to address those needs as well.
So, and you know, you mentioned that at the beginning of 2020, there was a lot of momentum in the housing conversation. And, you know, COVID-19 kind of changes everything. So how do you think the pandemic has highlighted the need for these new models?
it highlighted the issues of isolation among these people and the need to try and do something to promote social engagement, whether through technology or other things. And with the puck, sorry, I lost my thread. But for the seniors, it highlighted isolation and the value of community, although senior housing was really not too much different than assisted living, say, where people were pretty much, or for any of us, confined to their apartment or home. And so I guess it highlighted the importance or the potential importance of technology in terms of accessing the outside world. I know Age Friendly Rhode Island, which we're a part of, created virtual community centers where people can go and participate in activities and at least have some connection to the outside world, assuming they have the technological means to do so.
Yeah, and someone who's watching this is interested in helping engage with the issue and helping LeadingAge Rhode Island advance the cause. What are some ways that people can get engaged?
There's a lot of great housing advocates in Rhode Island, and so I consider LeadingAge to be part of the chorus in many ways. And so I know Homes RI obviously is taking a lead role, so people can get involved with them. They're a pretty broad and inclusive group, as you know. And then obviously just voting for the housing bond would be one way to get involved. That would help. So yeah, those are two things I can think of off the top of my head.
How are you all collaborating on the issue of housing?
We have regular meetings of our full membership, which would include all the different provider types, and they find it helpful to learn what's going on in the different industries, just in general, because what happens in nursing homes, the residents could have at some point ramifications for the other providers. But in terms of advocacy, it really depends on the issue. A lot of senior housing issues are at the federal level. And so that's where we work with our national, and they do a lot of advocacy with HUD and Congress. Obviously at the state level, there's still senior housing issues, whether it's issues I talked about, or sometimes there's legislation that would impact housing providers. And so we get together, our board gets together every year and highlights priorities that we want to advocate for, because we can't advocate for everything. And so some years there's maybe a nursing home issue or two is a priority, and then some years assisted living. This year, one of our priorities is there's a bill involving senior housing developments and emergency generators that could be a problem for them. So that's one we'll be actively engaged in. So every year is a little bit different, but we go through a process of seeing what's happening in the different industries and seeing what the state government is looking to do, and then figuring out how best to weigh in and advocate on behalf of the providers and obviously those that they're caring for.
When we're talking about seniors, oftentimes there's like this kind of looming feeling that there's just like a bunch of the boomers are about to all retire, and that there's going to be a lot of demand on senior services. Is that something you all think about or are worried about, or?
Yeah, both. Think about it and worry about it. And there's a lot of dynamics to it. Obviously, the boomers have started to retire, and they have changing or different needs or expectations than the population cohorts that preceded them. And so, yeah, it's sort of a twin challenge of how are we going to take care of all these people, and how are we going to pay for it. And so we've been involved, and the state has launched numerous, they call it rebalancing efforts, to promote own community-based care, people staying in the community, whether it's their own home or wherever, and try and avoid or delay nursing home care. And it's proven to be a lot easier said than done. because one of the number one barriers that's come up is if we're trying to divert or transition someone out of a nursing home, housing is always one of the top barriers. Where can they go that's affordable? And it's still a chronic issue. So we're trying to, and the state's trying to do some more to promote assisted living as a more affordable option for people with lower incomes, because that's traditionally been a private pay market that can be expensive. So trying to figure out how to manage people in the community in a more cost-effective way has been a focus of LeadingAge and the state and lots of different stakeholders over the years. And the biggest hurdle is housing. So hopefully we'll be able to make progress on that.